Hey guys, today we're going to run through everything I think we need to do to get this engine ready to start for the first time. Okay, so to get this thing ready to start for the first time, there's a few mechanicals and things we need to check over and get set for the engine to run. I'm going to run through the list I made of the things that I know just off the top of my head we need to get together to make this thing run. First thing, I got to drop some oil in the engine and the transmission. I got to plug my distributor in. Before I do that though, I'm going to pre-oil this thing. Before I pre-oil it all though, I'm going to run my valves and make sure my valves are adjusted, my rocker arms are adjusted appropriately. I got to put some vacuum plugs on the carburetors. And last but not least, I got to put some gas in this thing and get ready to fire. So, give me a couple minutes. I'm going to throw you some of my techniques, things I learned from my dad along the way on prepping an engine to start for the first time, particularly with adjusting our rocker arms. Let's do it. Okay, for any of you guys that are wondering what the specs are on this engine I've got in the car, it's a 350 small block out of a late model Chevy van. 5.7 liter from about the year 2000, so it does have the one-piece rear main seal and a hydraulic roller camshaft. The bottom end of the engine is basically stock. All I did is put new bearings, rings in it, but it's got the stock pistons. The heads on it are World Product Sportsman's 2 heads. They're a 202 intake valve. They have 72 cc chambers, and what that comes out to is about 8.99 to 1 compression for this engine. The camshaft in the engine, okay, yeah, that's one thing I did upgrade. I didn't want to go too radical, but it's a Melling 22280 camshaft hydraulic roller, and what that means is it's a 220 and 224 at 50 for the intake and exhaust duration, and then the advertised duration is 283 and 287. On the lift side for the intake, it's 495, and then the exhaust is 502, and that's on a 110 lobe separation. So, should be a pretty stout engine, should run well. Up on top though, this is where, who knows how this is going to work out. I've got the tunnel ram on here, which is again, vintage, Offie tunnel ram, and then my 2 Edelbrock 600 carbs. It's a lot of carburetor for this engine, but as long as it runs right, I'll be happy. Okay, adjusting valves on a hydraulic camshaft. More appropriately, adjusting the rocker arm. There's not much adjusting I can do on the valve. I'm just adjusting the lash on the rocker arm. Most of you already know this. Here's the technique I use. ICEO. Intake closing, exhaust opening, okay? And the way we're going to do this is we're going to adjust the exhaust valve when the we're going to adjust the exhaust rocker when the intake valve is almost all the way closed. And then we're going to adjust the intake rocker when the exhaust valve is just starting to open. Follow along, we'll get you down here close and we'll set the first one together. Now's a good time to talk about my one-man, small shop, small garage tech tip of the day. It's this guy right here. Okay, find yourself one of these little push buttons. You probably have one laying around somewhere. It doesn't have to be real heavy duty. It just has to work. Run yourself a couple wires. On the other end, put some clips. I'm going to go and clip these on my starter. This one on the big post, this one on the little starter pole, and then when I hit this button, clack, 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 the engine should turn over. Okay, there's no ignition involved with this, it's just turning the engine over. And what that's going to do is keep me turning this thing over by hand for each one of these valves. I can just kind of clack my way through it. Okay, well, before I start to turn it on this engine, turning it over and trying to get valves set and everything, I'm going to go ahead and put some oil in this thing. Talk about things I should have done yesterday. This is a lot easier to do with the valve covers on. You just dump it in and forget about it. But I happen to have a hole back there where the distributor is because I don't have the distributor in yet. So I'm going to dump it in right there. This is the kind I'm using. Valvoline VR1 10W30 because of this, high zinc. You can order on Amazon, pretty good deal there. If I remember, I'll put a link down there to it. But it works pretty well, and even on a hydraulic roller camshaft motor, I still like to run the high zinc stuff. So let's dump some juice in this thing and get ready to crank it up. Repeat that 4 more times and we'll be ready. Okay, so let's do this. I'm going to start here on the number 1 cylinder. Obviously, exhaust lined up with the exhaust pipe. We're going to be setting that one first. And I'm going to set this when the intake is almost closed. So I'm going to be watching this, and it's going to go, the intake's going to go through its cycle, as in it comes up on the lobe, and then as it just starts to come down in the back or release it and coming up in the front, and it's almost closed, that's where we're going to set the exhaust. So let's bring it around there and do that. I think it's there right now, but we'll bring it around one more time just to show. Okay, the intake's all the way closed. Intake's opening. Let's count that again. Intake's opening. And it's already coming back down like it's going to be closed. So now it's a good time to set the exhaust. Now, here's the trick. I'm going to bring her down close. And I'm going to be listening for a little bit of slack right here, okay? Hear that? As long as there's a little clickety-clack, I've got slack, and I'm going to bring it down to 0 lash where there's no slack. These have the lock on the inside, and it was too high up. Okay, there we go. Bringing her down. Okay, slack, no slack. Okay, the trick is we're going to go all the way down to no slack or 0 lash, and then we're going to give it half a turn. Okay, so then I'll come on here, half a turn. And then to set this, bring it down tight, back it off about 1/8 of a turn, and then back. Boom. Exhaust valve set. Now, set my intake. I'm going to do that when the exhaust is just starting to open. So now we're going to watch this and wait for it to just start to open my exhaust. There we go. The exhaust is just starting to open. Now I'm ready to set my intake. Same process. Bring it down to 0 lash. Okay, there's 0 lash. Half turn. Bring this guy down. Back it off 1/8 of a turn, tight, tight. Okay, so there we go. My number 1 cylinder, rocker arms are set, the valves are set. I'm going to walk through and I'm just going to go down the side. You can do it in a firing order, it doesn't matter what order you do it in. But I'm just going to go down this side, then I'm going to go over to the other side and get the even cylinders and have these bad boys sit here in a few minutes. Follow along. so we got our valves all adjusted, and then I went through and I put my gaskets on my valve covers and bolted them onto the car. Now my technique for that is I take a little bit of silicone, I'll put silicone on my valve cover, stick my gasket to that, and then bolt it on. That way my gasket always stays stuck to my valve cover when inevitably they're going to come off and go on the car. The next thing I got to do is pre-oil the engine. There's a couple ways to do this. You can drop the distributor in, just crank it and let it build oil pressure, look at the gauge. Definitely want to do something like that before you start it. Or the other way is to use a tool like this. Now, this tool costs like 25 bucks at like Summit. I got it thrown into a deal at on like a Craigslist deal. I bought a bunch of engine junk and the guy just threw this in. So it's really nice, it's worth it, but it simulates the bottom end of a distributor to include the sealing off the galleys here so that it won't leak out that way. And then you just put your drill on it and it spins the oil pump. I used to have one made out of a distributor. It works really well. You just cut it off, use the rod, stick your, or what I did on my old one was I welded a nut to the top of it, and then I could just put my drill on there with a socket on it. So that works. Just, I'm going to shove this, put this on my drill. I'm going to shove it down there and I'm going to pre-oil, and I'm going to have it cranking until my gauge reads some pressure. So I'm going to have one of my kids in there looking at it for me. So I won't do that on camera, but be rest assured I'll be back once I have oil pressure. Okay, so I got it pre-oiled, it ran up, it made good pressure, and I let it run for a while. Now ideally, I'd pull these valve covers off and watch the top of my rocker arms and wait till I got oil to the top of each one of those. Nah, no, I'm not going to do it. I got good oil pressure and ran it there for about a minute. So I know I've got oil pressure in the engine. Next thing I got to do is drop my distributor in. Now this is a used distributor. It's a Mallory Unilite. It came with the whole setup. A guy ripped it out of a car, sold it to me cheap. And so what I do with any distributor, before I shove it in, I use some of this engine assembly lube, and I'm going to put it right here on the teeth of the gear. I might have to jiggle it a little bit to get it line up with my oil pump, the tang on the oil pump. And in fact, I might have to take a real long screwdriver if I can't get it to and line it up just right. Because what I've done is I put my engine up on top dead center. In fact, it's set just right. It's about 12 degrees prior to top dead center. So now all I got to do is just put my pointer pointing at my #1 cylinder, make sure my cap's on with my #1 spark plug right on there, and it should be firing about 12 degrees prior to top dead center. So let's drop this distributor and get it ready. Okay, hit my first snag-o that's going to cost me some time tonight. I guess this is what you call hashtag tunnel ram problems. My distributor won't fit past the tunnel ram and the firewall down into the hole. So I could pull my engine, put my distributor in, or I think I'm going to attempt to just pull these 4 bolts, take the hat off of the intake, which is probably going to lead me to have to take some carburetors off, at least disconnect some fuel line. Luckily I don't have any fuel in the system yet. And try to move that forward and then drop that distributor down in and get it taken care of, and then that's got to go back into place. So that's going to cost me a little time. And it's almost dinner time, so I'll get done what I can and I'll come back later when I have that problem solved. Well, we're winning now. Got lucky and was able to overcome this one. It wasn't too bad. Thankfully, this tunnel ram intake is one of those with a removable cap, so I was just able to undo 4 bolts. I didn't even have to take anything else off. I was just able to pop it up over the stud, scoot it forward, drop my distributor down in. And if you guys remember, my timing is set right where I want it on my my #1 cylinder is set right where I want it, where all I got to do is line up now my #1 wire with the rotor. So I just marked it with a felt marker there where the rotor is. I think that's a pretty good starting point. Now I'm just going to pop my distributor cap on, stick my spark plugs in the holes, and run my lines there. And we should just about be there. So I'll be back in a minute. Alright guys, well thanks for sticking with me. Hopefully this is helpful to somebody on prepping an engine to fire for the first time. Alright, you can see I got my plug wires and everything in, and goodness, they are huge. This must have come from a big block or something, because they are gigantic. I'm going to have to replace them before I drive the car, but they'll work to get this thing going. So now I got to add some coolant in it. I've got to check, make sure I got spark and everything's ready, and then we're going to be ready to crank this up for the first time. Okay, so hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. Watch for the next one. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, hit the bell for notifications, because the next one that comes out, is going to be this engine firing up and running, all right? So thanks for joining me. Share this with a friend, and let's build this community.